Dune Part 2, it's here, that which we did not know if we were going to get after Part 1 has happened. Prayers were sent out, prayers were received, prayers answered. Review embargoes lifted, so now let's talk about Dune Part 2. So Dune Part 2 is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like, to be honest. I feel like I don't need to explain it, but I guess I will. It's part 2 of Dune, picking up right where part 1 left off. Essentially, this is the coming of age chapter for Paul Atreides. He and his mother, Lady Jessica, they're hanging out with the Fremen, and he will become Fremen. He'll become Muad'Dib, everything we've heard about and seen in other media. All the while, the Harkonnens are like, this Muad'Dib character is causing problems. We need to wipe out some Fremen. And I will say, the first hour of this movie, I was kind of worried about it as I was going into it, you know, because it was a love story. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think Hollywood has this weird phobia of love stories. But when I was seeing the trailers and the TV spots, I was like, oh, is this going to feel like some YA novel, young adult novel bullshit? Are we bringing that back? Oh God, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes just came out. Oh my, it needs to stay dead. I was pleasantly surprised that the first hour of this movie is my favorite hour of the movie. I was rooting for them with their young love growing. I was cheering Paul Atreides on as he went through his trials. You're proud with him and his accomplishments. This coming of age story really clicked with me. The story of this young man whose entire world was just burned to the ground. Threw his soul down to his bones, which were thrown down onto this desert planet in which he will rebuild himself better, to fulfill his destiny. I was behind all of it, man. This movie gripped me. This does benefit from the fact that this is part 2. Introduction was done in part 1. Now we're seeing where they go from there. So I'll answer the very obvious question. If it somehow crosses anyone's mind, yes. You need to watch part 1 before you watch part 2. However, you do have new characters. That would be Austin Butler as Thade. No surprise that he was cast in this movie. When this movie was being cast, there was a lot of chatter about him in the Elvis movie, so it's kind of, yeah, he's kind of a shoo-in. We need someone to play a psychopath. You already got the Smolder, as we saw in the Elvis movie. How about this? Don't look all charming and shit while you're doing the Smolder. Yeah, stone-faced Smolder. There you go. True Harkonnen psychopath. I still say Harkonnen. I know they say Harkonnen in here. I will always say Harkonnen. It's my programming at this point. Sting in the 1984 Dune was having more fun being a psychopath. Austin Butler Thade is like, yeah, that guy will kill you if he's just bored. But I thought he was great as Thade, even though sometimes it sounded like he was doing a Stellan Skarsgård impersonation. What do you want me to do about Arrakis, my Baron? I was like, oh, that's not the Baron talking. That was weird. Christopher Walken was shocking casting. Unlike Austin Butler, I was like, what was the conversation that got him the movie? There was no conversation. It was a casting that I feel like Denis Villeneuve was like, that's so crazy, it just might work. He doesn't have a large role. This movie is so enormous. There's so much going on that a lot of characters don't have a lot of screen time. I mean, to be honest, it's Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya have the most screen time. I mean, it should be that way. The entire story does revolve around them, but it's not even close. This is Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, other folks. So Christopher Walken doesn't even have a lot of screen time. I feel like even Stellan Skarsgård as Vladimir Harkonnen got pushed to the back. It's kind of a bummer. I like his character. It was sad to see less of him, but you just want to hear the Emperor be like, who is this Muad'Dib? May I ask? It's worth it, just for that. And I appreciate that you feel the scope and scale. Most of the movie takes place on Arrakis. It'd be easy to lose the galactic scope of things. But it is still there. You feel the scope of the scheming that has led us to this point. The Bene Gesserit scheming, the Harkonnen scheming. We're not just dealing with spatial scope, we are dealing with time. This is all a long time coming, a lot of planning. It's also felt in these surprising religious tones in here. It deals with religion, spirituality, belief. The differences in those concepts, how they can be used to control people. There's some solid heavy themes they're dealing with here. And Javier Bardem is the main vessel bringing that to the forefront. He's the believer. And he is unexpectedly funny about it, not in that forced humor kind of way you see a lot in movies. No, just in a very real way. The funny thing comes from just how real he's being about it. I just monologued about certain examples. I feel like we're bordering on spoilers. So they're gone now. The power of editing. I will say there were certain scenes in this movie that felt fast-tracked or cut short. Like you feel like, yeah, that's something that's probably on the cutting room floor. Which is an interesting way of just saying, yeah, this 2-hour, 45-minute movie probably could have been 3 hours, 15 minutes, but here we are. It felt that way. I don't know what to say. There are some more moments, and we'll say the final act. Definitely dealing with spoilers there, so just gonna say, yeah, they're in the final act. But some moments that I felt should have been more impactful just kind of happened. Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, I thought were great together. I will say Timothée Chalamet gets to a point in this movie where I have to buy him as more of a leader than I did before. And at that point, that's when I'm like, I don't see that as much. He's great as this boy royalty, Paul Atreides. He's great in this coming of age arc with him and the Fremen. But there comes a point, as you saw in the trailer, where he's all, silence! He's more. He's become a man, a leader now. And I was like, but has he? If you're a book purist, this movie might irritate you. I just know when I got out of the theater, you know, a bunch of critics talking to each other as we're all walking to our cars, all the conversations around me, wrapped into the ambience of the parking lot was, well, in the book they did why did they do this in the movie? Well, this movie did this, but the book. So if you're a book purist, you might have some problems with the movie. Shocker, I know. It's not the case in every adaptation ever. Said no one ever. Folks, it's like this. If you liked or loved Dune Part 1, you will like or love Dune Part 2. There's even a part of me that's like, if you didn't like Part 1, like if your gripe about Part 1 was, yeah, it feels like half a movie, I would argue that you can check out Part 2 because now you have the whole story. I mean, granted, it's in 5 hours, but you do have it. But if you didn't like Part 1 because you don't like the world or the lore, you're probably not going to like Part 2. It's very Dune world oriented and lore heavy. But I enjoyed that. I was surprised that I enjoyed learning about the culture of the Fremen as much as I did. And same epic, gorgeous visuals. Wanted to save this for last. Wanted to leave on this note. Cinematographer Greg Fraser is so good at the job. Cinematographer for Dune Part 1, Dune Part 2, The Batman, The Creator. His movies just look so gorgeous, and all of them, when people are like, hey, what'd you like most about the movie? I'm like, that's hard to pinpoint, but the visuals just speak to me. They draw me into the world. It's its own language. Don't know how else to explain it. He's so good at the job. I feel like he should be a big, bold name on the poster or the trailer, you know, when it's really trying to sell you as like, oh, from this person who directed this movie. I legit feel like from cinematographer Greg Fraser should be a thing. It should be. His name should be a selling point. All that is to say, the movie looks beautiful. I love Dune Part 1. I love Dune Part 2. Dune Part 2 is worth watching and worth buying on Blu-ray. It'll sit on my shelf next to Dune Part 1 because my fellow hard copy purists, you know what that's all about. I'm curious to see how Dune Part 2 is watching it as intended, as Part 2, coming right off of Part 1. Dune Part 1, it ends, you pop in Dune Part 2, you watch that. Have the whole 5-hour plus experience. I watched Dune Part 1 recently enough, a couple weeks ago, but that's still, it's a bit removed. I imagine that would be a pretty epic cinematic experience, but for my money, for right now, I thought Dune Part 2 was great. All right, so Dune Part 2, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Or what's your favorite iteration, your favorite version of Dune? On screen, you know, you got the movie from the 80s, you have the miniseries, now you have the Denis Villeneuve movies. What's your favorite? Whatever it is, whatever you think, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.